Last week we started talking about Ephesians chapter 5. A lot of great stuff there. The basic recap is wives, submit to your husbands as the church submits to Christ. And we talked about really some clarity of what submission actually is, and we talked about how submission is not respect. I don't want people to think that I'm going excessively hard on the women. Actually, the next 3 weeks is mostly about the men. So you guys got 30 minutes of one day. The men get 3 weeks. So don't feel too bad. But this is one of those things that is a very big point of contention for modern-day believers. So we're going to continue talking about love and submission, focusing more on, obviously, the love this week. And I hope, my genuine hope as a pastor is that the men of this church learn absolutely nothing from this service. I hope and pray that you learn absolutely nothing, that you're already doing these things, that you're already living this out, that you learn nothing. That is my hope. So if I'm going through this and you're thinking, man, oh man, I already know that, I already do that, good for you. Golden star for you, and I mean that genuinely. But these are things that absolutely have to get mentioned because, Paul wrote Ephesians to a church. This was what they got. Same thing, God still has that for us today. So if you please stand for the word, for the reading of the word, I should say. Ephesians 5:22 through 33. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, because the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of the body. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives are to submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her to make her holy, cleansing her with the washing of water by the word. He did this to present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or anything like that, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands are to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hates his own flesh, but provides and cares for it, just as Christ does for the church, since we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This mystery is profound, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. To sum up, each one of you is to love his wife as himself, and the wife is to respect her husband. Okay, so keep that in mind. Lord, I pray you be with us today for the service. I pray you guide my words and help it to be less of me and more of you. That you'd put a filter over my mouth, Lord, that all the words that I say would be the words that you once said. And Lord, that you'd put a filter in their ears, God, that you would raise up this church to be doers of the word, not just hearers. That you would bless them and anoint them to do the work that you've called them to do. Lord, in all things they'd live for you and for your passions and for your way of doing things. We love you, Lord. Be a blessing to them. Amen. All right. So, obviously, something from the get-go is this whole idea, hey, hold on, this is not fair. I, as the woman, have to submit, he only has to love? Man, oh man, I got the short change here. Well, here's the thing. Man is actually called to love to a higher degree that woman naturally loves first. Another way of saying that is a man is called to set the tone in the household. And how he does that is by loving to a greater degree than his wife naturally loves. Okay? It's very telling that nowhere in here does Paul say, wives, love your husbands. But he does say it for the men. Men, love your wives. And it's almost like maybe this is hugely, massively neglected by men, typically speaking. Not always, but typically. So the men set kind of the standard of love. Now, I could say more about that, but I think it's best if I just move on and you'll kind of see what I'm saying. These verses are not an exhaustive list of gender roles. Paul is not saying every single thing that a man is called to do and every single thing that a woman is called to do. Okay? Nowhere in here is he saying that a wife shouldn't love her husband. He's not talking about that. He's talking about these two things. Wives, submit to your husband as the church submits to Christ. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. Just this real firm basis. It's not an exhaustive list. So if you go to a verse like this and you try to find all the roles of men, you're not going to find it. What you're going to find in this passage is men, love your wives. Speaking from as a man, I can tell you that it is very difficult to remember to get past the to-do list and actually love your wife. It's much easier to just get in a rut. Men, we love ruts. Oh man, we love ruts. Women are great at starting things. Men are the ones who finish them and see them through. You know what I mean? A wife will say, let's get chickens. The husband will be outside feeding the chickens. Not always. But I'm saying men have this ability of just checking out and just doing literally nothing going on upstairs. And then the wife will say, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Literally nothing. They're not lying to you. Absolutely nothing. Nothing is going on upstairs. But then the next thing about this whole unfair passage is that everyone has to submit to someone. This is not a hot topic nowadays. I don't mean hot topic. This is a hot topic. It's not a favored topic nowadays. People don't like talking about submission. They don't like talking about this. But everybody submits to something all the time. You're either going to submit to the passions of your flesh, you're going to submit to your government, you're going to submit to something. Somewhere, somehow, you're going to submit to something. So everybody submits to something, even men. A great example of this would be actually found in Matthew chapter 8. It says this, "For I too am a man under authority, having soldiers under my command. I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it." So he's saying, I understand how authority works, Jesus. You don't have to personally go because you are under authority and you're in authority. It's the flow of authority. Same way, husbands are also under authority. And you might say, it's not fair that I have to submit to my husband. Remember that your husband has to submit to God, and he has to answer to God. You just have to answer to your husband. Remember that, because that's not like he gets off the hook. He's held to a higher standard. And we're going to build on that, so just don't go anywhere. 1 Corinthians 11:3 also has the same kind of idea. Peter talks about it. It's all throughout the word. We're just going to focus on these two. It says, Christ is the head of every husband, and the man is the head of the wife. Now, he's talking specifically about authority structures in the family unit, not about how it works maybe with different families and with the government. He's not talking about that. He's talking about family relationships. So moving on from there, we can see, yes, absolutely, everyone has to submit to someone. See, God has this fourfold authority structure that he's created. Everything on the world functions under these four authority structures, and they are in this order: family, church, government, business. That's how God has set up the world. Family structure looks like this: husband, wife, kids. It's not that one is more important than the other one, or one is more of a person than the other one. That's how the authority structure works. Same thing is true for the church. You've got the pastor, the elders, the congregation. There's an authority structure. Well, who's the pastor's authority? The district. Who's the district's authority? The general council. See what I mean? There's a flow of authority, and it follows one another. The government, it's harder to say the government because, first off, the American government has a lot of red tapes and goes this way and that way and everything. But typically, every government, no matter where you are in the world, is going to have some kind of a flow, some kind of, authority structure. And then there's business, obviously, employer, employee, boss, slave, however you want to say that. And different places in the world work differently, but there's a basic idea. And there's this idea going around nowadays, which, our parents, well, maybe some of you guys here, authority was really taught a lot. And now my generation has gone to the other extreme, and they never talk about it, and it's gotten to be very unhealthy. What people will say with a straight look on their faces, they'll say, I'm submitted to God, I just don't submit to man. They'll say this with a straight look on their face, and well, what's the problem with that? The way that you submit to God is by submitting to man. God has placed authority structures. If you are submitted to God, it will show by your submission to man. That's how it works. Anything else is anarchy. God created a system, and it works. It's a good system. We just don't like the system because we think in our self-importance and self-worth, I'm too big of a person to submit to someone else. But once again, everybody submits to somebody. Now remember, we're talking about loving, not submission, so just try to keep an eye on this. I'm talking about the man submission in this part, okay? I'm not repeating information from last week. Maybe another way of saying this about the whole submission thing is if you can't submit to man who you have seen, you cannot submit to Christ who you haven't seen. As men of God, we should not be known for our rebellion in our hearts. There are times when we have to stand against corrupt governments, I understand that. But the general rule of thumb is that we are supposed to be in submission as our wives are also in submission to us. We're in submission to Christ. We're in submission to how things are. We aren't out there causing a mob. We aren't out there, what's it called, rabble-rousing? We aren't doing that. We are bringing unity. We're bringing the love of Christ. That's what our job as a man is. And so this whole idea of, I'm submitted to God, I'm just not submitted to people, then you're not submitted to God. That is the test. So then another thing about this whole unfair thing with men seeming to get off the hook is, I will say this, it's just as hard for a man to love his wife as it is for the wife to submit to her husband. They each have their own struggles. Men have an amazing ability to go through completely numb motions. Job without heart. You know what I mean? You come home, it's not that they're going to divorce you, but they just kind of checked out. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not trying to say that men don't divorce women. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, and I think the wives here know what I'm getting at here. Men have just this ability to just go through the motions of the marriage. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get her flowers. I'm not going to write her poems. I'm not going to do anything out of the ordinary. I'm the provider. I'm taking care of her. Moving on. I got home from work. I'm tired. Leave me alone. There's this ability to go through this set standard. That's not loving our wives. That's not loving our wives. And so it's very important that Paul talks here about men, love your wives, because we don't normally do that. Men are placed as the head of the house. What that means isn't that we get to use our power to domineer over the wife. That actually means that we are held to a higher standard than women are. Men are held to a higher standard by God than women are. For instance, 1 Peter says this. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, husbands, in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way. As with a weaker partner, now I understand nowadays saying the weaker partner, that's kind of a point of contention. We'll come back to that some other day. Showing them honor as co-heirs of the grace of life so that your prayers will not be hindered. What he literally just said is, husbands, if you mistreat your wives, God will not answer your prayers. There's actually a pastor I was listening to that said this in a wonderful way. And so I'm going to steal his example because I think it just perfectly fits. He gave the example that before your wife was your wife, she was God's daughter. And so when you mistreat God's daughter, the dad with the shotgun comes out. You understand what I'm saying? Now, this is not something that's said anywhere in Scripture to the woman, but it is singled out as to the men. Now, does that mean that women can mistreat their husbands? I'm not trying to say that. My point here being, men are held to higher standard. Men can also, which you kind of hear this more from younger people that have been married than from older people, but it still happens. And that's that men cannot treat their wife how the wife treats him. Okay, especially in a divorce situation. She's going to start being kind of snippy because it's a divorce. She's upset. Obviously, she's emotionally distraught. You cannot repay that in kind. Well, she's being petty, and you're the man. Let it go. Let it go. You know what I mean? I will even go a step further. If you have been divorced and you don't get over your attitude towards your ex-wife, it's going to filter towards your new wife. Eventually, in time. And the same kind of thing, you're going to say, well, I tried that once, it didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. You know what I mean? So that attitude is going to follow you over to the new relationship. And my point here being that whereas a wife shouldn't act a certain way, the husband cannot use how the wife acts to justify his actions. You understand what I'm saying? Well, my wife did this, so I'm going to... No, you're not going to do that because you're the man of the house. She's not the man of the house. You are. You set the tone. You show how things go in this house. And in this house, I'm not going to talk down to my wife even if she talked down to me. That's the job of a man. You set the tone. Also, that means that men cannot treat their wives how he thinks that she deserves to be treated. And what I'm getting at here is more is required from the men than from the woman. Verse 25... Verse 25, we'll just repeat a couple things here. It says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. See, here's the thing about love. It's easy to love. Really it is. Back in the day, people were married because they had arranged marriages, and then people started marrying for love, and now people start shacking up because of lust. Hey, I'm into you. Let's move in together. And there's no commitment, there's no love, it's just, hey, I'm into you. So then when something inevitably happens, they protect themselves by saying, this is a toxic relationship, you're toxic, and then they just move out. That's not the way that God has structured this. It's easy to love. It's hard to love as Christ. See, the standard that Jesus gave, or Paul is, but God's talking through Paul, so that Paul gave to husbands here is to love to the same degree that Christ loves the church. That's altogether differently. That's completely different. And I think speaking as a man, I can honestly talk to the men and say, we're not there. You know what I mean? We're not there. I think it'd be much easier to take the back seat and submit to the wife and let her run the show than it would be to love. And I say that because, wives, I understand that it sounded rough what I said last week. I understand that. But remember, I didn't say it, the Bible did. Okay, that's the first thing. Second off, remember, it's our job to trust the whole of God's word, not just the parts we like. And then third off, remember that in the grand scheme of things, submitting to your husband is a much smaller task than God has commanded him to do. And God will judge him harsher for it than he will you. God will give you more grace than he will the man. So, loving as Christ, Paul gives 4 basic things of what that entails. Laying down your life. Laying down your life. Now, I know that guys often say, well, I take a bullet for my wife. I die for her. That's great, but there's no bullets. No bullets are flying in the room. How about you live in a loving way instead of waiting for some grand thing 20 years down the road that might never happen? Well, if we ever lose the house, I'll give up my lunches for her. That's great, but you live in a house right now, so what can you do now before some grand tragedy hits to show your wife love? Do it now. Don't wait until there's a bullet flying at her to jump in front of the bullet. It's a whole different thing. So laying down your life, making her holy is the second thing that a husband is tasked to do. Making her holy. Boy, oh boy, is a shoe on the wrong foot nowadays. Nowadays, wives know more of the Bible than husbands. I say this to our shame, men. We should know more than our wives about God's word, not less. We should be leading the family in spiritual activities, not taking a backseat. You know how sad it is when a wife will get up and take the kids to church instead of the husband getting up and leading the family to church. Like, that's just a tragedy. And I see these younger people getting married that the husband doesn't prioritize things and show the wife what is important. Instead, my job is to love. That's one side of it. Moving on. Laying down your life, making her holy. Providing was the third thing that Paul mentioned in this passage in Ephesians 5. And the fourth thing that he mentions is caring for her. And in that aspect, a wife is a lot like a flower. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I think some specific examples could help. Giving yourself for your wife. Okay? Choosing her first over your family, over your kids. Having her back no matter what. Even if she's in a bad mood, still having her back. Even if she did something you really don't like, you're still going to have her back. No matter what fire you find yourself in, having her back. We live in we live in a culture nowadays that says it's okay that I'm looking at this online content because my wife made me mad. She hurt my feelings. No, it's not. There's a lot of things that this culture does that just completely backwards. Next off, treat her, and this is a general statement here, treat her as Christ would. When you're dealing with your wife, stop and say, am I treating her as Christ would treat her if he was dating her? Pretend like Jesus is dating your wife. How would he treat her? Do that. Don't rag on her in front of the boys. Oh, my old lady, That's very common for guys to get together and badmouth their wives about how they're a nag or how they're this or how they're that. We're men of God. Don't let your kids rise against your wife. I don't know how many times I see this, and I understand now a lot of you guys don't have kids in your house anymore. I understand that. Maybe some of you might in the future. Maybe some of you have grandkids. So this still does apply. I see a lot of times where the wife will degrade the husband in front of the family and make fun of him. And then I see a lot of times that the husband won't stand up against the kids. And you who have adult kids, I'm talking to you too. When your kids become adults, you still protect them, protect your wife from them. See, it's natural for people to rebel. It's natural. Husbands want to rebel against the government. Wives want to rebel against their husbands. Kids want to rebel against the parents. I mean, it's just natural. We all want to rebel. It's just something inside us. We all have this rebellion spirit. But here's the thing I'm getting at here. Don't. When you are in a situation where you clearly have the upper hand, you could totally, don't. And if you're married, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not, you're probably thinking, what is he talking about? Don't let kids rise against, there should not be, whether your kid is an adult or a child, they should not be rising up against their mother and you sitting back and doing nothing. That shouldn't be happening. You should say, that's not how we talk to my wife. No, that's not how we're doing things here. Now, obviously, that's going to cause some tension, especially if you have allowed your adult children to badmouth your wife. There's going to be some tension. They'll grow up and move on, or they'll get mad, and then they'll have to grow up, and then they'll move on. Whatever happens with them, that's not your problem, though. What's your problem is to protect your wife. Protect your wife. I see a lot of times husbands take back seats and just let whatever happens. This is a terrible thing that's happened. We need to step up and be the men of the house. In short, we should be our wives' safe space. Now, I'm going to say something that when I was younger, I thought this was a sexist thing to say. And my thoughts have drastically changed in the course of being married. I thought different women were cut out of different cloths. They're not. They're all the same. Your wife, without fail, is like a flower. She's like a flower. I'm not saying she's dainty and everything and she, sips her tea like this. That's not what I'm saying. Your wife is a flower in the sense that she is delicate. Our culture doesn't get this because we grew up looking at online content where women don't act how women actually act in the real world. So we get in relationships and we think that's how women act, and that's not how women act. And I think this is a huge mistake because we don't just go in there barging around. We're delicate with the wife because she is a flower. Basically, you can see how well you love by the health of the flower. Now, I'm not talking about if your wife is overweight or has medical issues. I'm not talking about that. That's not what I'm saying. Rather, is your wife blooming and blossoming? Is your wife blooming and blossoming? You're doing a good job loving her. Is she not? Something needs to change. Something needs to change. See, it's not a wife's job to carry herself in sickness. It's a man's job to carry himself in sickness. It's the husband's job to lay his life down for the wife. There's a difference. I'm not saying the wife can't tend to the husband. What I'm saying is, husbands, if you have it in you, you got to keep going. You got to keep going no matter what the situation is. And that's something that is hard to do, but remember, you answer to Christ. Ultimately, you don't answer to your wife. Your wife doesn't answer directly to Christ. She answers to you and also to Christ. I understand that the things that I'm saying are going to be very difficult to hear. I understand that. But still, it's the Word of God. You have to be careful and gentle with the flower, and you can't destroy her, because if you destroy her, you're destroying yourself. You are the head of a body. You can't destroy the body. Look at what this says in verses 28 through 29. I know we already read this. In the same way, husbands are to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. End of thought. For no one ever hates his own flesh. And you might say, well, hold on, what about people who hurt themselves? Conversation for another day. But typically people who hurt themselves are because they actually love themselves. They just feel numb and they're just trying to feel something. So that's conversation for another day. For no one ever hates his own flesh, but provides and cares for it, just as Christ does for the church. And then that takes us to a little bit of a next step, which is this. Most husbands don't know how to speak love because they were never taught how to speak love. We were told to man up. We were told not to be a baby. We were told, you just power through. So we don't really know how to be loving. And so then our wives are like, why aren't you loving with me? I don't know how. I am emotionally retarded. I have no idea how to do this. I know how to provide, and that's just about it. You know what I mean? I don't think that women realize how older women will know how unintelligent their husbands are. But I don't think most women understand how unintelligent we are. We give off a really good image, but that's just about it. There's this psychologist, Dr. Gary Chapman, who wrote this book called The 5 Love Languages. And basically, his idea is that everybody communicates love in a different way, one of 5 ways. And basically, this is how they receive love, it's how they speak love, it's how they, talk love, it's how they give love. These 5 love languages. And I mean, they're pretty simple to get. I know that on the screen it is hard to see that. Goodness sakes, it's hard to see that. But don't worry about it. I'm going to tell you what they are anyways. There's acts of service. This is where you do something for them. There is, which I think most men do that by default. We provide and we fix things because that's about all we're good for. You know what I mean? We don't know how to be emotional, and all that touchy-feely stuff makes us feel awkward. You know what I mean? We didn't get hugs growing up, and now you want us to do that? Well, nobody told us, I love you growing up, and now you want us to say, I love you? You know, but okay, so there's that. Then there's quality time. This is where you're not distracted. You're just spending one-on-one time with them, right? Then there is gifts. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. You're giving them something meaningful. Then there's words of affirmation. Some people really need this. Some people really don't. You know, things like, hey, you're doing a good job. I love you. I love the way that you did blank. You know, things that basically saying things. And then the last one is physical touch, which when I was a kid, I thought because women are, you know, more fragile and stuff, that they all like physical touch. And then I grew up. They don't. No, they don't. Sometimes they just, don't touch me, don't look at me, don't think about touching me. It's like, okay, all right. In fact, I actually see a lot of guys who speak physical touch more than girls. And that blew me away when I grew up. You know, that's one of the things. And as a man, it's very hard because we're told all of our life that our worth is based on what we provide, what we shell out. Be the man of the house, provide for things. That's all you're good for. That's all we're told from the moment we're kids. It blows me away that when we're kids, we teach girls totally different than we teach boys. You know, and that's a conversation for another day. But so we get to a place and we say, well, this isn't fair. I provide for my wife. I'm a good provider. If she needs anything, she can just tell me. I think most men fit in that camp right there. If she needs anything, she'll tell me, right? I'm a provider. I'm doing a good job. What is this nonsense saying that I'm not doing a good enough job being loving? It's not fair. Yeah, you're right. It's not fair, but we're not called to be fair in marriages. We're called to be loving in marriages. We're called to be loving in marriages. You can tell what your wife's love language is because it's going to be the one that they complain the most about you, right? How come you never get me gifts? How come you never get me jewelry? Well, chances are hers is gifts. Why don't you ever hold my hand? Well, that's probably physical touch. Well, how come I have to ask you over and over again, you never do this for me? Well, that's probably acts of service. You know what I mean? Find the thing that they're complaining about. That's probably their love language. Of course, you could also just ask them, how would you like me, you know, how could I love you better? But that involves words, so I understand it might be difficult for most of us guys. Oh, my goodness. Whichever one that they do most for you is probably going to be their love language. If your wife is always getting you gifts, chances are that's her love language. Moving on to Ephesians verse 26, it says, to make her holy, cleansing her with the washing of water by the word. Now, we're going to have to come back to this in the coming weeks. And I think in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about cultivation in a marriage, but that's not for today. The idea here that I want you to get is not beating her down, but building her up. You know how easy it is as a husband to beat your wife down? I sometimes do it on accident, not even realizing that I have done it. And then months later, she'll say something, and I'm like, what? That's how you thought I was saying? You know, men don't really connect in the same way that women do. Men are also at times less touchy-feely with like being in touch with things. So we'll say something and just think, oh, well, that's just the way things are, right? And then our wife will be upset about it and we'll be like, huh? And we'll be genuinely confused. I'm convinced that 100% of times that a wife says, I want a divorce, the husband has no idea why. That statistic isn't like anything I pulled from a research paper or anything. I just know what it's like to be a man, and I've talked to a lot of people who in their marriages, and it seems like 9 out of 10 times, or 10 out of 10 times, the husband has no idea that there's even a problem until she says, I want a divorce, and then he's like, what? What? You guys aren't laughing like I'm intending for this joke to land, so I'll just move forward. As a husband, you're called to accept her traits and grow her spirit based on the word. And once again, we're going to have to come back to that. But an example of this would be, hey, you never clean up your mess. We've been married for however many years and you're still a slob. Here's the thing. Instead of that, maybe a different tactic you could take. Hey, don't give up, honey. You're doing a good job. Is there anything I can help you with? I know the longer we've been married, we forget to check in with our wives, but that's because wives don't have a cruise control setting. Men do. It took me a long time to figure this out. And your wife, the only control she has is a gas pedal that if it's left alone for too long, slams on the brakes. I don't understand how this works, so don't bother asking me. But basically, you have to go over there and keep pushing on the pedal to get her to keep going. You know what I mean? And I don't mean nagging her to death. I mean encouraging her. I don't know how that works, but women just have this need for the husband to do better than the husband is used to getting for himself. Sometimes you have to remind your wife. Sometimes you have to teach her. But we'll get to that another time because I think that there's a lot of unpacking to do with that. But verse 27 says, he did this to present the church himself in splendor without spot or wrinkle. And let's just stop right there and say, who do you present your wife to? Yourself. You present your wife to yourself. He did this to present the church to himself in splendor. You're doing this to present your wife to yourself. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and I understand that. Which is why we're going to, 2 weeks from now, I'm telling you, that's all we're focusing the week after Father's Day is just focusing on cultivation in your marriage. So I understand there's a lot to go there. We'll just keep moving, though. Now, there are some specific things that were told to women, and when he comes back to the end of it in verse 33, you'll notice that he said the same thing kind of as he did at the beginning of the verses, but he said it differently. So in verse 22, he said, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, and he said, husbands, love your wives as Christ does the church. But then in verse 33, he says it totally different. He says, to sum up, each one of you is to love his wife as himself. Okay? And then he says, and he said that earlier, he said, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And he says, love your wife as you do yourself. And now he's saying that again. So that's fine. But then we get to this part at the end, and it seems like it's just out of the left field, okay? And the wife is to respect her husband. Where did respect come from, guys? We said submit. What are we getting at here? And you might say, well, hold on. You said last week that the wife was never called to submit. This is a translation issue, so let me just try to break this down as easy as I can. The word that is translated there is respect her husband is basically a word that comes from the idea of fear. Fear your husband. Now, obviously, this brings more questions than it gives answers, so I'm going to have to kind of unpack this as far as what do I mean by fear your husbands. Hold on. Hold on. There's different kinds of fear. Did you know that? There is the fear of man, for instance. This is where you're afraid of what somebody's going to do to you. I'm afraid this guy is going to beat me up, or whatever, right? Then there's the fear of the world. This is basically like a general anxiety about maybe the future, about the state of the economy, stuff like that. That's the fear of the world. But then there's the fear of God, which is used totally different than those fears. And it's more of the idea of, when it says to fear God, it's not saying every time you come to church be so anxious you have an accident in your pants. That's not the idea of fearing God. The idea of fearing God is more of submission to him, obeying him. That's the idea of fearing God. Treating him with reverence. That's the idea of fearing God. Well, this is, if I remember correctly, it's the exact same word. If it's not the exact same word, it's used in the same way. I don't have my Greek Bible here. I don't keep one up here. I keep it in my office. So I can't look it up right now, but I believe it's the same word. And the idea that we get when I say fear your husbands is something along the lines of this. Be afraid of your husband. He's going to hurt you. Which is definitely not the idea that this passage is getting. More of fear is a synonym of submission. To fear your husband is to submit to him, to follow his leading in this context. There are other words that he could have said in other ways he could have said it about being afraid of your husband. That's not what he's saying. So because this is kind of a hard thing to translate, they just settled for respect. And I'm going to say most of your translations are going to say respect your husband. This is not the respect that I was talking about last week. And I'll talk about what I mean by that respect here in just a minute. But let's stay focused on one thing at a time. Fear is not the same as mutual respect. Rather, think of it as the idea of revere. Revere your husband. And in this sense, the word is related to the idea of submission. So whereas he uses a slightly different word to say this, he's saying the same idea. Submit to your husband. Think highly of him. Give way to him. So we've talked about a lot of things, and it's kind of hard let's just kind of make things simpler, and I'll go through with a breakdown of what all the different words mean. Love. Husbands, love your wives. Here's some good examples. Her needs come before your wants. So when you come home from work, you're tired, you just want to relax, instead of going straight to the couch and vegging out on the television or video games or whatever have you, connect with your wife. That is so hard. When I come home, my brain is fried. There's sometimes when my wife will try to ask me something, I'll say, well, what did you say? And she'll say it again, I'll say, what? And she'll say, I'll talk to you about it tomorrow. And I'll say, okay, do that. And that's not what I'm saying, but there's still that connection that happens with your wife. Say things like, hey, I love you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Have you told your wife this in the past week? I will never leave you or forsake you. Have you told her that in the past week? I am happy with you as my wife. I'm glad I married you. Have you told your wife that in the past week? Wives need to hear their husband say, I love you. There's just something in them that is constantly looking for the validation of their husband. And unfortunately, what I see happen is as the marriage matures, the wife gets used to not being validated by her husband, and it just has this general tension that follows through with the marriage. It gets very shaky. So then people get into their 40s and 50s and they're married, and they're still having the same problems as when they were younger because the husband never took the time to validate the wife. We'll move on, though. Loving your wife, making her a priority in your life. Responding to things in love, making her the priority. To be a man of God and to get the respect of your wife and the submission of your wife is to be a man of God. All other things can be summarized as, you want to love your wife like God wants you to love her? Be a man of God. If you're not married, you want to have a good marriage, learn how to be a man of God. Learn how to be a man of God, and when you get there, if your time ever comes, and it's okay if it doesn't, but if it does, you'll be ready for it. Focus on not winning the arguments, and hear me on this, guys. I know we've been going for a while. I understand that, but just hear me. Stop trying to win the argument with your wife. I'll give you a very quick rundown of why. If you win the argument with your wife, you've lost because you've just torn down your wife. If you lose the argument with your wife, you've lost because you just lost. There's literally nothing in it to gain winning an argument. And you know the difference between a conversation and an argument. You know the difference. The argument is just there because you're tired of being pushed down and you want her to know what's up. You know what I mean? And a conversation is you guys are both trying to figure something out to go forward. When she is withdrawn from you, just be patient. Don't withdraw from her in return. Just give her a second and be patient. Don't chew her out, especially don't make a habit of chewing her out. Wives are, once again, really delicate flowers, and when you start breaking the door of chewing your wife out, you can't close that Pandora's box. In short, loving your wife is being as Christ to her. So we're talking about love and we're talking about submission. Whether we're talking about husbands love your wives or wives submit to your husband, it all starts as an attitude in your heart. Husbands, your love starts as an attitude in your heart. Wives, your submission starts as an attitude in your life, and it flows out into the actions. Remember I said last week with submission that it's more a heart issue than anything. It's about the attitude mostly. When you do things, whether as a husband or as a wife, to nag and demand and be demanding from your spouse, what you need to understand is, I understand you want things done. I understand that. Your husband probably understands that too, or your wife, whoever has. Sometimes it's the husband who's being demanding and nagging. All that you're doing is building resentment in your family. When you as a husband make a priority of nagging your wife, you are building resentment in her. You understand? When you as a wife are nagging your husband, you meet him at the door with a to-do list as soon as he gets back from work, you are building up resentment. When either party nags and is demanding of their spouse, you're building up resentment and tearing down love. And I can tell you that over time what's going to happen is you're going to stop loving and she's going to stop submitting, or you're going to stop doing it. If a husband loves his wife, he will not nag and demand her and be demanding of her. If a wife submits to her husband, she will not nag and be demanding of him. See, they both do the same thing, but for different reasons. Do you give your spouse peace? I just want to stop there for just a minute. Let's think about this. Nobody's answering out loud, but just think about this. Do you give your spouse peace? I'm not saying do you fix their attitude. Their attitude is their problem. Do you give peace? Do you bring peace in the household? There was this idea that got going back in the 50s that basically the wife was responsible for having the house as a peaceful and restful, quiet place, and for the husband to come home, and she was always with a smile on her face, dinner was always ready. That's not really how marriage works. That's not how, that was a false goal. Do you both bring peace? Because what happens is you get bad in your heart. He says something or she says something, bad gets in your heart, and then it comes out by either not loving as the guy or not submitting as the girl. And everything gets polluted. Everything you do, it gets this attitude. And you've got this little bit of nastiness in your heart. And because you won't deal with it, it's coming out with everything you do. Some examples of what it is not unloving. There are two specific things that when we're talking about husbands love your wives, I hear wives say these two things quite a bit, so let's kind of just simplify it, okay? If you're talking with your husband and you're just trying to gripe and complain and he gives you a solution and he tries to solve the problem, that's not him not loving you. That is a husband trying to love you in the best way he knows how. Action. Men are fixers. That's what we do. It's what we were taught to do since we were kids. So you're coming to us with complaints. We don't know how to just sit there and listen to you whining about something. We were told, don't whine, get up and rub some dirt in it. So now you want us to just know to do that, and you get mad at us for something that is just, it's not realistic. Now, obviously, man, there should be a balance between trying to solve and trying to listen. But wives, I will say this, learn to enjoy your husband being a man. Trust me, you wouldn't like it if he was a woman. The second thing that I hear from wives is, my husband doesn't listen. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. And you're going to say, how are you possibly going to say that it's not being unloving to not listen to your wife? Hold on. Don't crucify me just yet. By show of hands, who thinks that women are the better communicators? Not a whole lot of you. Okay. By show of hands, who thinks that the man is the better communicator? Even less. And a lot of you didn't even raise your hand. Okay. All right. So now we know what we're dealing with. Here's the thing. Women, everybody knows they're better communicators. But husbands, don't answer this. Don't answer this. Husbands, in the past month, has your wife gotten upset at you because she implied that you should do it instead of just saying that you should do something? Yeah, you're laughing now, aren't you? So who's the better communicators now? Here's the thing. Guys just aren't smart enough to figure it out. I mean this genuinely, okay? I'm a guy, I know what I'm talking about. We can't... We got things on our mind, man. We've got all these thoughts, and they're just all jumbled up in there, and now you come implying something. If you want something done, just say it. Like, there's no way that your guys are going to be able to figure this out. I know guys that have been married 40 years, and they still don't understand that their wife is trying to imply something. We just can't figure it out. Stop with the cloak and dagger. Just say it. You want something done, just say it. Golly, you don't know how many times married people have fights because there's no communication. And they'll say there needs to be communication, but then they don't actually communicate. That's not being unloving. That's not being able to translate from the language that the wife is speaking. Okay? So don't come up to me this week saying about your husband doesn't love you because he's not listening to what you're saying. Maybe actually trying to communicate to him. And we'll move on from there. Some things of what are unloving for a husband to do. It's my money, I'll spend it how I want. Okay? If I wanted your opinion, I'd ask for it. Raising your voice at your wife. These are some examples of not being loving to your wife. Really isn't the things that we typically think about, but yeah, there they are. When we talk about submission or revering your husband, what does that mean? Well, I mean, I think it's a lot simpler than people try to make it out to be. You're making life better for your husband, not worse. You're building towards it. You're saying things like, hey, thank you. I'm proud of you. Hey, you did a great job with this. I think most of the times, husbands don't hear those kinds of things from their wife. Most of the times. Not always. It's where you're treating your husband with exemption. You're not being stiff-necked. You're not being petty. You're passive-aggressive. You're not being combative and causing fights and butting your head with him all the time. You're submitting. So then what, if that's what love is, that's what respect or submission is, what is this idea of mutual respect that I brought up last week? Well, it's not the same idea that Paul is saying in the end of Ephesians 5, that's for sure. What mutual respect is, neither party is talking down to each other. You both are respecting people. You're both respecting each other. Neither party is talking down to the other one. Neither one is attacking the other one. Neither one is disrespecting the other one, either to their face or behind their back. Neither one is assaulting. I know people talk a lot about men not hitting women. We were taught that since we were kids. Honestly, when I see people on the news and this guy beat up this girl, I'm thinking, what? Like, we were taught that from when we were babies. Come on. But then at the same time, we also need to say it's not okay for wives to hit men either, or their husbands either. This is not okay. It goes both ways. There should be no assault, no physical assault in the marriage. Now, neither party is bad-mouthing the other. Neither one's manipulating. Neither one is irritating. And you know what I'm talking about, irritating, okay? For instance, as men, we have two simple jobs. One is to find our wife when she's happy and make her upset. And then the other one is to find her when she's upset and make her happy. And then we do this by saying things like this. You're acting just like your mother. You need to calm down. This joke, guys. Nobody knows. That was a joke. No, that was a joke. Come on. And we're wrapping up here, but I hope you see the difference between what loving your wife is, what submitting to your husband is, and what mutual respect is. Because I feel like a lot of times when we're talking about biblical ideas of marriage, there's not a whole lot of thought that goes into it. People read it and they kind of already have their mind made up and they never think about it and they just move on. What we do, and this is how I want to end today, what we do is we say, God bless my marriage, but I don't want to do it your way. God bless my marriage, but I don't want to do it your way. So the wife will say, I want God to bless my marriage, but I don't want to submit to my husband. And the husband will say, well, I want God to bless my marriage, but I don't want to have to love my wife. I'm not saying love and feeling, I'm saying love and action. And that's not how it works. If you want a marriage that God blesses, wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives. And that's a marriage that God will bless. So if you'll please join me in prayer. I want to talk specifically to the married people before I talk to the single people. If you're married, I'm giving you a task like I gave the wives a task last week. I'm giving the men a task this week. Go home today and sometime today ask your wife, how am I not loving? How can I love you more? And genuinely listen without getting defensive. Lord, I pray you'd bless these marriages. Help them to get stronger and stronger. I don't care if they've been married for a day or married for 100 years. It doesn't matter to me. Lord, that they would be stronger today than they were yesterday. And tomorrow they'd be stronger than they are today. We know what your word says about marriage, and we know that how much you treasure marriages. The church is built on strong marriages. Everything is built. Society is built on strong marriage. And you've given us as men a calling, a divine calling to love our wives and be the head of our house. Lord, give us the wisdom. Lord, give us the wisdom and the heart to do it. That we would lead our wives in worship. That we'd lead our wives in prayer and in trust and in faith. Lord, that we would be an example to our wives about what it means to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. Lord, give us the strength to keep going no matter what comes against us. Lord, I also pray that you'd help the wives to be patient with their men. Lord, that they would encourage the husband in the task that you have set before him. That they'd work together as a team and be stronger for it. Now I want to talk to the single people for just a minute. If you're single, you might say, well, how does any of this relate to me? Well, the first thing is stay submitted to Christ in all things. The second thing is love others as you have been loved. Lord, I pray for the single people that they wouldn't feel like they have to rush to get in a relationship, God, but that you'd help them to put you first and for you to be their treasure and their prize. Lord, help them to have a heart that's steadfast on you, even in the midst of loneliness. God, that you would be a comfort to them. You'd be an ever-present help, Lord. You'd be the lifter of them when they feel run down. And we love you, Lord. We love you, Lord.